Good morning. We are holding an important hearing during National Police Week, a time when we recognize and honor the sacrifices and service of our men and women in law enforcement from across the country. I'm pleased to have some of my own constituents here that are joining us today, and I'd first like to recognize Odessa Police Chief Michael Gerke as a witness today. In addition, I'm pleased to have Midland County Sheriff David Kreiner and his wife Judy in the audience with us. I've had the luxury of getting to know both of these gentlemen as well over the last 2 years, and I know that Chief Gerke will provide some valuable insight as to what issues rural police departments are facing throughout the country. Unfortunately, I think we've forgotten what it means to support our men and women in law enforcement who serve our communities every day, many of whom, well, let me strike that, all of whom are real-life heroes. Last year, 246 law enforcement officers were tragically killed in the line of duty. This year, there have already been 41 officers killed in the line of duty serving their communities. Just this past Thursday, on May 11th, Sergeant Joshua Klaus of the Cameron Police Department in Texas was shot and killed by a subject who was wanted for shooting his wife during a domestic violence incident earlier in the night, as he and other officers executed a search warrant. Sergeant Klaus was an Army veteran and had a wife and 2 children. He is a hero, and I pray for his family and friends. We've also forgotten the importance of holding people accountable for engaging in criminal activities and preying on law-abiding citizens. From increases in aggravated assaults, robberies, and retail theft to dealing illicit fentanyl, I think many Americans no longer feel safe in their communities. Some cities are even releasing criminals back into their communities due to zero bail policies and downgrading the sentencing for felonies, allowing these bad actors to continue committing crimes. What message is this sending to career criminals? It is not one of law and order, but instead encourages lawlessness across the homeland and is unacceptable. While criminals are not being held accountable for their actions, our law enforcement officers face extremely low morale in many places. And unfortunately, in some places, that's due to anti-police sentiment. Extreme budget cuts, rogue legal reforms, and the media bias against law enforcement have resulted in significant recruitment and retention challenges for state and local law enforcement agencies across the country. These factors are not only preventing law enforcement from carrying out their duties to protect Americans, but they're also impeding police agencies across the homeland from having the resources to further train officers and prevent other mishaps. If we continue down the path of cutting law enforcement budgets, police departments will be left with a difficult choice between lowering recruitment standards or being unable to meet their hiring needs. This committee has an important role to play as we oversee the Department of Homeland Security, which looks to support, and let me say that again, support state and local, tribal, territorial law enforcement agencies in their efforts to keep our communities safe, secure, and resilient. From a Homeland Security standpoint, it has been over 20 years since 9/11 happened, yet we still have challenges for the timely sharing of information and between the federal government and state and local agencies. While we have made significant progress, I worry that there continue to be gaps in how we share information in a consistent and timely manner. We have to work together to overcome these barriers, as information sharing is critical to combat the wide variety of threats that we face today. In particular, when it comes to fusion centers, which are primarily state-funded facilities established with the purpose of information sharing between those levels, there is a common saying that says, if you've seen one fusion center, you've seen one fusion center. It's important that we ensure DHS is properly supporting fusion centers as they serve as focal points in state and urban areas for the receipt, analysis, gathering, and sharing of threat-related information. States like Texas have many different threats impacting their communities. I've seen firsthand how metropolitan areas like the one I visited in San Antonio can coordinate seamlessly between federal, state, and local levels. Furthermore, DHS provides various federal grants to assist state, local, and territorial partners. We need to ensure that these grant programs continue and that they are effective in doing out what their mission says that they should be doing. Unfortunately, rural areas like my district do not experience that luxury and must rely on fusion centers that are located in other areas. And there have been numerous times in the last month where Texas DPS or CBP were pursuing human smugglers, drug traffickers, or other malign actors through small towns in West Texas, along the border that have led to catastrophic loss of life. Had a fusion center been established that caters to the unique needs of those rural areas, maybe it could have been easier for local and state law enforcement agencies to better coordinate with CBP and DPS. Today, I hope that we can examine this issue. I hope that we can find ways to highlight the information sharing and where it can be more readily available and more effective. Lastly, it's important that our nation must restore a sense of appreciation for the men and women who wear the uniform, who protect our communities, and who have been willing to sacrifice their own lives for the betterment of their communities. We have a very distinguished panel of witnesses to testify about the challenges between state and local law enforcement agencies, both in rural and in urban areas. And I'd like to thank all of our witnesses, not just for being here today, but more importantly, for you and your family's sacrifices in being willing to serve. To have a distinguished panel of witnesses before us today on this very important topic. And I ask that our witnesses please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Formally introduce our witnesses. Michael Gerke serves as Chief of Police for the Odessa, Texas Police Department. In this role, he serves as the Chief Administrator of the Odessa Police Department and is responsible for the policy development, control, supervision, and program implementation of this department and is accountable for the effective delivery of police service to the community. The Chief's office is the command center of the department and administrates the department's annual budget. Chief Gerke has proudly served Odessa, Texas, and that department for more than 26 years. He received an associate degree in criminal justice and police science from Odessa College, a bachelor of applied arts and science and criminal justice in law enforcement from Midwestern State University, and a master of science from Tarleton State University. I'd like to now and Chief, thank you for being here. I'd like to now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Michelle Steele, to introduce Sheriff Don Barnes.
Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and it is my honor to introduce Sheriff Don Barnes of Orange County, California. With over 30 years of service, Sheriff Barnes is well-versed in the public safety needs of Orange County West Intelligence.
Boston Police serve a 4-year term as a member.
At this point in my career, we partnered with you.
Testified multiple times before Congress on policing topics. He holds degrees from City University of New York and DePaul University in Chicago, including a law degree. Thank you for being here, and I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here. And now for the part that we actually came for, the witness testimony. And I'd ask each of you, you've submitted your written testimony, so please summarize and do try to stay within 5 minutes because we do have lots of members who want to ask you questions. From Odessa, Texas, Chief Michael Gerke, for your opening statement.
Well, good morning, distinguished members of the committee. The reason for the existence of law enforcement agencies is to make the lives of the citizens that they serve better. And it's my belief that the main way that we do that is to reduce violent crime. Violent crime has the most significant effect on their victims. To this end, as an example of effective policing, about 2.5 years ago, we partnered with the United States Attorney's Office in the Western District of Texas for the priority prosecution of those individuals apprehended in our community who were convicted felons, narcotic dealers, and gang members who were in possession of firearms. This led not only to a reduction of violent crime in the area, but also a reduction in property crimes such as auto thefts and burglaries. This is a shining example of what partnerships between local and federal authorities can accomplish. We continue to have a very strong relationship with the Assistant United States Attorney in our area, and she is one of the most trusted and valued members of our team. It's very important to have these relationships as we move into the future and face the coming challenges. The most persistent challenge that we feel at this point in my community is the use and abuse of fentanyl. The use of fentanyl has led to numerous overdoses and numerous deaths in our community. And we all know that that trade route for fentanyl starts in China, comes through Mexico, and crosses the border and ends up in our community. And it's, particularly in West Texas, it's harming predominantly our children, our young adults. We've seen 12-year-olds to 19-year-olds to 60-year-olds who have overdosed on fentanyl. We're at the point in law enforcement that we have issued Narcan or other types of antidotes to every one of our officers, not just to help to relieve the overdoses with the victims, but also to help each other. Because unfortunately, officers do come in contact with fentanyl when we find it illegally on the street, unknowingly get contaminated, and we have to apply those antidotes to each other. But I also want to talk about another challenge that we face, and that challenge is staffing levels, pure and simple. Odessa, as you look across this panel, I am the small guy on the panel. So I have 181 sworn positions. Of those 181 positions, I'm about 38 short as we speak today. And I live in Odessa, which is the Permian Basin, which is one of the world's leading oil and gas producing areas, right? So high school graduates often don't see the value of education. They don't see the value of waiting, and they move into employment in the petroleum industry. And quite honestly, those careers pay more than a career in law enforcement. You can take an 18-year-old young man that graduates from Permian High School, and that young man, in a matter of a few months, can be making six figures in the oil field. Our starting salary is $69,000. Also, in Texas, individuals cannot be employed as police officers until they're 21 years of age. Many times, that 3-year gap leads individuals to different career paths and down paths that no longer allow them to be in law enforcement. Going back to violent crime and fighting that and other issues such as narcotics in our community, I want to take a moment to just talk about the importance of technology. Because when you look at smaller departments like mine, sometimes the funding's not there, but there's grants. But sometimes those smaller departments, even smaller than mine, have a very small knowledge of those grants. So I think there needs to be a push, a help for those smaller departments to understand those grants. Because I tell you, automatic license plate readers and video cameras and advanced analytical software and forensic equipment are game changers. They're absolute game changers. And finally, I'd just like to say it's essential that more and better cooperation between all levels of law enforcement happen and that proper outcomes be identified. Please understand, numbers of arrests and the numbers of seizures don't really matter as much as lowering the number of crime victims. So what we should be worried about is our victims. We can only accomplish these reductions if we all work together. Remember, and this is what we say around the office all the time, egos and attitudes are the enemy of progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Gerke. All of you for your service and for being here, for telling us your own community's needs, experiences, and how we can better come together. I want to push back on something that we just heard from some of our opening statements. We had 26,031 homicides in 2021, and this is on the CDC's website. And the rate of hate crimes in those homicides was 0.0008%. So Commissioner Cox, congratulations on bringing the crime rate down. I think what you've done is remarkable in Boston. And I've got the data here. This year, looking at 588 aggravated assaults, and you compare that to New York City, 8,901. in New York City, 8,901 in a soft-on-crime locality where aggravated assaults are there. So would you say that most of the 588 aggravated assaults are white supremacy related?
And I would say that there's no correlation. Well, you know what? I don't know without the data on that,
But I mean, is that consistent with the homicide rate, the aggravated assault rate, that it's extremely low?
there's no correlation I know of right now between white supremacists and
This notion that we hear, let's focus on violent crime and the violent crime offenders. Let's focus on making sure that we actually take care of business. So I needed to push back on that because what we've just heard is the numbers aren't matching up. Chief Gerke, I want to talk about fentanyl a little bit. You've identified that fentanyl is one of the greatest harms in Odessa, Texas, and the surrounding area. And since 2019, fentanyl-related deaths among Texans have increased 500%. What is the greatest challenge you face in preventing fentanyl deaths and trafficking of fentanyl?
I mean, really, that's easy. It's keeping them from my community. Once they get into the community, it's very difficult to root them out. Again, it's heartbreaking to see that a lot of the fentanyl overdoses and deaths are concentrated on young people.
How difficult is it, the open border policies that we have, how difficult is that on Odessa, Texas?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it seems like there's just a sea of those narcotics. And we're not just talking about fentanyl, we're talking about all narcotics. Particularly in Odessa, I think our most predominant narcotic is probably methamphetamine use.
Can you talk to us about human trafficking and the effect that has had on your community?
Well, absolutely. You get calls about safe houses constantly. You respond to those things. You see constantly get calls. I know just over sometime last week we worked a prostitution sting and actually recovered 2 Chinese nationals who were trafficked. So. Yeah, it's an ongoing problem. I would think in Odessa, but I would also think all over the state of Texas and probably all over the southern border.
Well, thank you for your service to Odessa, Texas. For the shining example of what you've done over the last 26 years and now leading that department. Sheriff Barnes, thank you for your testimony. I took a couple of notes, and you talked about how California is an example and a warning of how not to be. And what I'd like to focus on is you describe how the consequences for crime have eroded over the last decade while law enforcement authorities are struggling to keep communities safe. Could you kind of tell the community or the committee here specific examples of when policy changes have tied your department's hands and not allowed you to have those consequences?
Sure, and I'll try to go fast. So over the course of the last decade, starting in 2011, was Assembly Bill 109. It was state prison realignment. Anybody sentenced to prison for nonviolent, non-serious, non-sex acts were now being housed for their time in county jails not designed for long-term incarceration. That resulted in a large impact on my facility because our staff is not designed to house people for years, and they're very non-compliant. 2014, we had a bill passed, Prop 46, that resulted in the largest decriminalization of crime in the state, drug crime and property crime. And those people are now not serving sentences as they would before. Then we had Prop 57. It's Prop 47 and Prop 57, mass decarceration of the federal prison, state prison system. That with SB 54, prohibiting us with acting with ICE on immigration holds except for very high-level offenders, and oftentimes them not getting picked up by ICE because they don't have the resources to do that. All of these have manifested into a large decarceration effort. I'll add that the last 5 peace officers killed in California were killed by violent felons who should have been in custody and were early released or pending sentencing on crimes that had access to guns that they should not have had. It's not the guns, it's the people getting possession of guns, the criminals getting possession of guns that create the greatest threat to our country.
Sheriff, thank you. We support you. We love everything that all of you do to keep our communities safe. My time has expired. I recognize the ranking member for his 5 minutes of questioning.